At 2130 hours on October 4th, 1941, Richard Sorge sat in his Tokyo home encoding a wireless message to Moscow. The message was brief. Japanese Imperial Conference decided September 6th that Japan will not attack Soviet Union in 1941. Japanese military will move south toward British and Dutch possessions. Sorge encrypted the message using Soviet military intelligence codes, transmitted it via shortwave radio to a Soviet listening station in Vladivostok, then destroyed his notes and returned to drinking whiskey. The message reached Moscow within hours. Soviet military intelligence, the GRU, forwarded it to Joseph Stalin. Stalin read Sorge's assessment. It confirmed what other intelligence sources were suggesting. Japan would not attack the Soviet Union from the east, while Germany attacked from the west. The two-front war Stalin had feared since June 1941 would not materialize. The 18 Siberian divisions stationed along the Manchurian border, over 250,000 men, 700 tanks, 500 aircraft could be transferred westward to defend Moscow. Stalin made the decision in mid-October. Transfer the divisions. Move them by rail 5,000 miles from Siberia to Moscow. Deploy them to stop the German advance that was within 50 miles of the capital. The gamble was enormous. If Sorge was wrong, if Japan attacked the Soviet Far East while the divisions were gone, the Soviet Union would lose Siberia, lose access to the Pacific, potentially lose the war. But Stalin trusted Sorge's intelligence more than he trusted most people. Sorge had been right about everything for 8 years. Stalin bet Moscow's survival on Sorge being right again. The divisions arrived in November. They counterattacked in early December. The Wehrmacht, expecting Soviet collapse, instead faced fresh Siberian troops equipped for winter combat, supported by T-34 tanks that German armor could not match, led by officers experienced from fighting Japanese forces in 1939. The German advance stopped. The Wehrmacht withdrew from some positions. Moscow was saved, and the Soviet Union survived to continue fighting. Richard Sorge was 46 years old in 1941. Born in Russia to a German father and Russian mother in 1895, raised in Berlin, educated in economics and political science, wounded 3 times fighting for Germany in World War I. After the war, Sorge joined the German Communist Party, worked as journalist and political agitator, was recruited by Soviet military intelligence in 1925. By 1929, Sorge was a Soviet intelligence officer operating under cover as freelance journalist. In 1933, Soviet intelligence sent Sorge to Japan. His mission was to infiltrate German diplomatic and business community in Tokyo, gather intelligence on German and Japanese military planning, and report on possibility of German-Japanese alliance against Soviet Union. The mission was essential. Stalin feared encirclement Germany attacking from west, Japan from east. Intelligence on Japanese intentions was critical for Soviet strategic planning. Sorge established cover perfectly. He joined the Nazi Party membership number 3589717, presenting himself as loyal German nationalist who happened to live in Japan. He worked as correspondent for Frankfurter Zeitung, a respected German newspaper that provided legitimate reason for Sorge to meet diplomats, military officers, and government officials. He cultivated friendships aggressively, using his personality charismatic, intelligent, heavy drinker, womanizer to become popular in German expatriate circles in Tokyo. His key relationship was with Eugen Ott, German military attaché who became German ambassador to Japan in 1938. Ott met Sorge in 1934. They became close friends. Sorge helped Ott write reports on Japanese military capabilities. Sorge introduced Ott to Japanese officials. Ott trusted Sorge completely, discussing classified German diplomatic and military matters openly. Sorge had achieved the ideal intelligence position, trusted confidant of the German ambassador, with access to German and Japanese government sources, completely above suspicion. Sorge's intelligence network in Tokyo included approximately 20 agents. Hatsumi Ozaki, a Japanese journalist and government advisor, provided intelligence on Japanese government decisions and military planning. Branko de Vukolich, A Yugoslav journalist provided additional access to Japanese sources. Max Clausen, a German radio operator, transmitted Sorge's reports to Moscow using wireless equipment hidden in his home. The network operated for 8 years without Japanese counterintelligence detecting it. The intelligence Sorge provided was extraordinary. In 1935, he reported on anti-Comintern Pact negotiations between Germany and Japan. In 1936, he reported German military buildup and rearmament. In 1937, he provided detailed intelligence on Japanese invasion of China. In 1938, he reported on German plans to annex Austria and Czechoslovakia. In 1939, he provided advance warning of Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact negotiations, intelligence Stalin ignored, because Stalin was negotiating the pact himself and knew about it already. In 1940, Sorge reported that Germany was preparing to invade Soviet Union. The reports were specific German military buildup along Soviet border, Wehrmacht logistics preparations, diplomatic signals from German government. Sorge sent multiple reports through 1940 and early 1941 warning of German invasion. Stalin dismissed the reports as British disinformation designed to provoke war between Germany and Soviet Union. Stalin believed Hitler would not attack Soviet Union while Britain remained undefeated. Stalin was wrong. On June 15, 1941, Sorge sent urgent message. German attack on Soviet Union will begin June 22. The message was precise, accurate, and ignored. Stalin had received similar warnings from multiple intelligence sources, including British intelligence, Soviet spy networks in Europe, and diplomatic channels. Stalin dismissed them all. He believed the warnings were provocations. He trusted the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact would keep peace between Germany and Soviet Union. On June 22, 1941, Germany invaded. Stalin's intelligence services had warned him correctly. Stalin had ignored the warnings catastrophically. After the invasion, Sorge's intelligence took on new significance. Stalin could no longer dismiss warnings as provocations. The war was real. Intelligence about German capabilities, Japanese intentions, and potential threats became critical for Soviet strategic planning. Sorge shifted focus to Japanese intentions. Would Japan attack Soviet Union from the east while Germany attacked from the west? The question determined whether Soviet forces in the Far East, 18 divisions, 250,000 men could be transferred westward to defend European Russia or had to remain in Siberia to defend against potential Japanese attack. Japanese strategic planning in summer 1941 was divided. The Imperial Japanese Army wanted to attack Soviet Union. The Soviet Far East had resources, oil, minerals, territory. More importantly, attacking Soviet Union while Germany was winning would secure Japanese northern flank and eliminate potential Soviet threat. The Japanese Army called this strategy Strike North. The Imperial Japanese Navy wanted to move south. Southeast Asia had resources. Japan desperately needed oil from Dutch East Indies, rubber from Malaya, rice from Indochina. British, Dutch, and American colonial possessions were vulnerable. Britain was fighting Germany. Netherlands was occupied by Germany. America was neutral but hostile. The Navy argued Japan should seize European colonies while European powers were distracted. The Navy called this strategy Strike South. The decision was debated through summer 1941. German victories in Soviet Union initially favored Army position. Soviet Union appeared to be collapsing. Army argued this was perfect moment to attack. Soviet forces would be unable to defend Far East while fighting Germany in Europe. But German advance slowed in August and September. Soviet resistance was stronger than Japanese expected. Army enthusiasm for Strike North declined as Soviet collapse seemed less certain. The Navy's arguments gained strength. American oil embargo in July 1941 made access to Southeast Asian oil critical. Japan's oil reserves would last 18 months at most. Without new sources, Japan's military would be paralyzed. The Navy argued Strike South was now essential for survival. The debate reached Imperial Conference meeting of senior government and military leaders with Emperor present on September 6, 1941. The conference decided Strike South. Japan would prepare for war against Britain, Netherlands, and United States. Japan would seize Southeast Asian resources. Japan would not attack Soviet Union in 1941. The decision was final, though secret. Japanese military began planning operations that would culminate in Pearl Harbor attack December 7, 1941. Sorge learned of the decision through Hatsumi Ozaki, who had access to government sources. Ozaki confirmed Japan had decided against attacking Soviet Union. Sorge verified through other sources, including conversations with German Ambassador Ott, who had been briefed by Japanese government. By early October, Sorge was confident enough to send definitive message to Moscow: Japan will not attack Soviet Union in 1941. The intelligence was precisely what Stalin needed. German forces were approaching Moscow. The Wehrmacht had advanced 500 miles in 4 months. Soviet casualties were catastrophic: over 2 million killed, 3 million captured. Moscow itself was threatened. The Soviet government was evacuating to Kuibyshev. Stalin was considering evacuating but chose to remain, calculating that his presence would steady morale. But remaining in Moscow meant defending Moscow, and defending Moscow required troops. The Siberian divisions were the only significant Soviet reserve available. They were trained, equipped, experienced from border conflicts with Japan in 1938 and 1939. They were stationed along the Manchurian border because Japanese Kwantung Army, 700,000 men, posed constant threat. Transferring the divisions westward meant gambling that Japan would not exploit their absence. Stalin needed confidence Japan would not attack. Sorge's intelligence provided that confidence. The first Siberian divisions began moving westward in mid-October. Rail transport across 5,000 miles took weeks. The divisions arrived Moscow region through November. By early December, 18 divisions had been redeployed, approximately 250,000 men, 700 tanks, 500 aircraft. They were fresh troops facing exhausted German forces. They were winter-equipped, facing Germans in summer uniforms. They were experienced, facing Wehrmacht units, depleted by 5 months of combat. On December 5, 1941, Soviet forces counterattacked. Marshal Georgy Zhukov commanded the operation. The Siberian division spearheaded the assault. German forces, unprepared for Soviet offensive capability after months of Soviet retreats, were pushed back. The Wehrmacht withdrew 100 to 150 miles from Moscow. The immediate threat to the capital was eliminated. The psychological impact was enormous. The Wehrmacht, which had seemed invincible, had been defeated in front of Moscow. The strategic implications were profound. Moscow's survival meant Soviet government survived, Soviet command structure survived, Soviet military survived. If Moscow had fallen, Stalin might have been killed or forced to flee. Soviet resistance might have fragmented. German victory might have been achieved. The Siberian divisions made the difference between holding and collapse, and Sorge's intelligence made the Siberian transfer possible. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, Japanese counterintelligence was closing in on Sorge's network. In October 1941, Japanese police arrested one of Sorge's agents on unrelated charges. Interrogation revealed connections to other agents. Japanese police conducted surveillance, intercepted communications, identified network members. On October 18, 1941, 2 weeks after Sorge sent his crucial message about Japan not attacking Soviet Union, Japanese police arrested Sorge at his Tokyo home. Sorge was interrogated for months. He initially denied everything. He claimed to be a German journalist with no intelligence connections, but Japanese interrogators had evidence testimony from arrested agents, intercepted wireless transmissions, documentation from searches. Sorge eventually confessed. He admitted being Soviet intelligence officer. He described his network's operations. He provided details about intelligence reporting. He was prosecuted for espionage against Japan. The trial concluded in September 1943. Sorge was convicted of espionage and sentenced to death. Japanese authorities informed Soviet government that Sorge was in custody. They offered to exchange Sorge for Japanese citizens arrested by Soviet authorities on espionage charges. The exchange proposal was normal diplomatic practice. Sorge was valuable intelligence officer. Soviet Union could have him back in exchange for Japanese prisoners. Stalin refused. Stalin denied knowing Sorge. Stalin denied Sorge worked for Soviet intelligence. Stalin claimed Sorge was German journalist with no connection to Soviet government. The denial was deliberate. Stalin had several reasons. Acknowledging Sorge would compromise other Soviet intelligence operations. It would reveal Soviet intelligence methods and capabilities. It would confirm to Germany that Soviet spies had penetrated German diplomatic circles. Most importantly, Stalin simply did not care about individual agents. He used them and discarded them without sentiment. Sorge remained in Japanese custody for 3 more years. His execution was delayed while Japanese government hoped Soviet Union would change position and accept exchange. Soviet Union never acknowledged him. On November 7, 1944, exactly 3 years after Siberian divisions saved Moscow, Richard Sorge was hanged in Sugamo prison in Tokyo. He was 49 years old. He died believing Stalin had abandoned him. He was correct. Stalin never publicly acknowledged Sorge during Stalin's lifetime. After Stalin died in 1953, new Soviet leadership reassessed Sorge's contributions. In 1964, Soviet government finally acknowledged Sorge had been Soviet intelligence officer. Sorge was posthumously awarded Hero of the Soviet Union. Soviet Union's highest honor, streets, schools, and institutions were named after Sorge. Soviet propaganda celebrated him as greatest spy of World War II. But the recognition came 20 years after Sorge's death. During the war, when acknowledgement might have saved him, Stalin remained silent. Stalin's calculation was coldly pragmatic. Sorge had served his purpose. Acknowledging him provided no benefit and risked compromising other operations. Better to let Sorge die than to reveal Soviet intelligence capabilities. Individual lives meant nothing compared to operational security. The irony was that Sorge had provided intelligence that arguably saved Stalin's regime. Without Sorge's October 1941 message about Japan not attacking, Stalin might not have transferred Siberian divisions. Without Siberian divisions, Moscow might have fallen. Without Moscow, Soviet resistance might have collapsed. Sorge's intelligence potentially changed the war's outcome, and Stalin repaid this by denying Sorge existed. Sorge's network in Tokyo was dismantled completely. Japanese police arrested approximately 35 people connected to the network. Hatsumi Ozaki was executed in 1944, same day as Sorge. Max Clausen, the radio operator, was sentenced to life imprisonment, but was released in 1945 after Japan's surrender. Other agents received various sentences. The network that had operated successfully for 8 years was destroyed within weeks of Japanese police identifying it. The operational security failures that led to Sorge's exposure were not dramatic. One agent was arrested on unrelated charges. That arrest led to another. The network's compartmentalization was inadequate. Agents knew too much about each other. Once Japanese police identified one member, they could identify others through surveillance and interrogation. The collapse demonstrated that even the most successful intelligence operations are vulnerable if a single weak point is exploited. German Ambassador Ott's reaction to Sorge's arrest was shock and betrayal. Ott had considered Sorge his closest friend in Tokyo. He had discussed classified information with Sorge regularly. He had trusted Sorge completely. Learning that Sorge was Soviet spy destroyed Ott personally and professionally. Ott was recalled to Germany in disgrace. His career was ruined. He had been compromised by the spy who called him best friend. But Ott was not prosecuted. German authorities investigated whether Ott had been complicit or merely fooled. They concluded Ott was duped. Sorge's cover had been perfect Nazi Party member, German journalist, loyal nationalist. There was no reason for Ott to suspect Sorge was Soviet agent. Ott's trust was reasonable given Sorge's cover story. The investigation cleared Ott of intentional compromise, but his career was finished anyway. The damage to German intelligence from Sorge's access could not be overlooked. Post-war analysis assessed Sorge's intelligence contributions as decisive for Soviet survival. The October 1941 message about Japan not attacking allowed Stalin to transfer forces that saved Moscow. Without those forces, Moscow likely falls. Without Moscow, Soviet government potentially collapses or is severely weakened. The alternate history where Sorge does not send that message is a history where Germany potentially wins the Eastern Front by capturing Moscow in late 1941 or early 1942. But Sorge's contributions extended beyond the October 1941 message. 8 years of intelligence on German and Japanese planning provided Soviet leadership with strategic understanding of Axis intentions. Sorge's reports on German rearmament in the 1930s warned of German military buildup. His reports on Japan's China invasion provided intelligence on Japanese military capabilities. His reports on German invasion planning warned of Operation Barbarossa, warnings Stalin ignored but which were vindicated by events. The tragedy of Sorge's story is the contrast between his achievements and his fate. He provided intelligence that helped save Stalin's regime. He operated successfully for 8 years without exposure. He maintained perfect cover as German Nazi journalist while serving Soviet intelligence. He achieved the most important intelligence success of World War II, and he died, executed by the nation he spied on, abandoned by the nation he served, denied recognition for 20 years after death. The personal dimension of Sorge's story is also tragic. He was genuinely loyal to Soviet communism, despite Soviet government's paranoia and brutality. He believed in the cause enough to risk his life continuously for 8 years. He could have stopped, could have disappeared, could have kept the money he was paid and lived comfortably. Instead, he continued operating until caught because he believed the work mattered. His loyalty was rewarded with denial and execution. Sorge's personal life was complicated and self-destructive. He drank heavily. Whiskey was his preferred drink, and he consumed it constantly. He had multiple affairs with women, including wife of German Ambassador Ott's advisor. He lived dangerously in ways that risked his cover. Japanese police had suspected him of being communist sympathizer in the 1930s, but never confirmed it. Sorge's behavior attracted attention, but his German cover protected him. Germans were trusted in Japan as allies, and Nazi Party membership made him seem ideologically safe. The drinking and womanizing were partly operational. They made Sorge seem like typical German expatriate journalist, not disciplined intelligence officer, but they were also personal weakness. Sorge was self-destructive in ways that nearly compromised his mission multiple times. That he operated successfully for 8 years despite personal recklessness is testament to how good his cover was and how badly Japanese counterintelligence underestimated the threat. The final message Sorge transmitted before his arrest was about Japanese military planning for operations in Southeast Asia and Pacific. The message included intelligence that Japan was preparing for war against United States and Britain. The information was valuable, but less immediately critical than the September message about Japan not attacking Soviet Union. Sorge's last operational contribution was warning Moscow of Japan's southern advance information Moscow forwarded to Washington through intelligence channels. When Sorge was arrested and interrogated, Japanese authorities tried to determine extent of intelligence compromise. How much had Sorge learned? How much had he transmitted to Moscow? The interrogation was brutal. Sorge was beaten, sleep-deprived, psychologically pressured. He eventually told interrogators most of what they wanted to know. But he protected some information, particularly details about intelligence methods and techniques that might compromise Soviet operations elsewhere. The trial was conducted under wartime security regulations. Details were classified, press coverage was restricted. Japanese government did not want to acknowledge that Soviet spy had penetrated German diplomatic circles in Tokyo for 8 years. The embarrassment was severe. Japan was allied with Germany. German ambassador had been compromised. Japanese counterintelligence had failed to detect the network. Public acknowledgement would damage Japanese-German relations and reveal Japanese security failures. Sorge's execution in November 1944 came as Soviet forces were advancing westward across Europe, as Japan was losing the Pacific War. As Axis defeat was increasingly certain, Sorge died knowing his side would win, but also knowing his government had abandoned him. His final letters from prison expressed no bitterness toward Soviet government, only regret that he could not continue serving. The loyalty remained even after Stalin's betrayal. The lesson from Sorge's story is complex. His intelligence was decisive, his tradecraft was excellent, his courage was unquestionable, but his reward was execution and denial. The lesson might be that intelligence services use agents and discard them, regardless of their contributions. Or it might be that operational security requires sacrificing individuals to protect systems. Or it might be that Stalin was uniquely callous in abandoning successful agents. The interpretations vary, but the facts remain. Sorge saved Moscow. Stalin let him die. Soviet Union only acknowledged him after Stalin was gone. The spy who saved Moscow died in a Japanese prison, executed by enemies, abandoned by allies, recognized only posthumously. The single most important intelligence message of World War II. Japan will not attack Soviet Union, allowed Stalin to gamble on transferring Siberian divisions that saved the capital. The agent who sent that message was denied by the man whose regime he saved. This was Richard Sorge's story. Brilliant success, personal tragedy, historical impact that shaped the war's outcome, and posthumous recognition that came too late to matter.